Adil Khan was known in his city for his success and confidence. At just 32, he owned several businesses and carried himself with the arrogance of a man who believed he had earned everything he desired. When he met Sara Malik, her calm beauty and gentle voice seemed to balance his strong personality. She was 25, raised in a modest but loving household, and had a reputation for kindness. Their marriage was arranged through mutual friends, and from the first meeting, Adil was determined to make her his wife. Sara's parents saw stability and wealth in Adil, while Sara herself saw a man who seemed protective and ambitious. The wedding was extravagant, filled with flowers, laughter, and luxury. Guests spoke of how perfect they looked together, the successful businessman and his graceful bride. Cameras captured every smile, every promise, and every dance. But even in those moments of celebration, there were glimpses of Adil's possessiveness. He corrected Sara quietly when she spoke too long to a male cousin, and frowned when her friends hugged her for photos. Most thought it was harmless protectiveness, but those who noticed his eyes knew there was something darker behind them. After the wedding, Adil wanted to make their honeymoon unforgettable. He chose the Maldives, where clear turquoise water met endless skies. The trip was meant to mark the beginning of their dream life together. When they arrived, Sara was filled with awe. The island was stunning, quiet, and romantic. She took photos of every sunset, the white sand beneath her feet, and the food they shared by candlelight. Adil watched her constantly, pretending to be attentive, but deep inside, his admiration mixed with a silent insecurity. He loved her beauty, but he feared it too. For Sara, the honeymoon was a dream. She believed her husband was simply shy or tired from travel when he stayed quiet. She laughed easily, thanked the resort staff with warmth, and even chatted briefly with other honeymooners they met by the pool. Each time she spoke to another man, no matter how polite the conversation was, Adil's chest tightened. He would stare at her afterward, smiling faintly but thinking about every word she said, every gesture she made. One evening the resort hosted a romantic dinner by the beach for all the newlywed couples. Sara looked radiant in a light blue dress, her hair loose and glowing in the firelight. When a friendly foreign tourist complimented her smile, Adil's jaw stiffened. He said nothing, but his mood shifted instantly. For the rest of the night, he spoke little, his eyes sharp, his thoughts spinning with jealousy he couldn't control. As they returned to their villa, Sara leaned against him, tired but happy, unaware of the anger smoldering beneath his calm surface. The ocean breeze was soft, the moon high, and everything around them whispered peace. But inside Adil's mind, something darker was taking shape, a dangerous obsession, quiet and growing, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite it. The morning after the beach dinner, Sara woke early to capture the sunrise from their villa balcony. The light touched the waves in golden ripples, and she smiled, feeling a rare kind of peace. Adil joined her, his face unreadable. He complimented her softly, but his words were hollow. Inside, he replayed the scene from last night, seeing again how that foreign tourist had looked at her. Every time Sara smiled, he saw another man's reflection in her eyes. What had once made him fall for her kindness, her ease around people now felt like a threat. They went for breakfast at the resort restaurant. The staff greeted them warmly, and one young waiter smiled a little too kindly at Sara as he poured her coffee. Adil's jaw tightened. Sara thanked the waiter politely, unaware of the storm brewing beside her. The rest of the meal was silent, though she tried to make small talk about snorkeling and sightseeing. Adil simply nodded, his mind twisting her every word into something else. Later that day, they took a boat tour organized by the resort. Other couples joined them, laughing and taking photos. Sara stood near the railing, the sea wind blowing through her hair. A man from another group commented on the view, and Sara replied politely. That simple, innocent exchange lit something dangerous inside Adil. His thoughts turned dark and obsessive. He began watching every movement she made, convinced that her friendliness was disrespect, that her politeness was betrayal. When they returned to their villa, Adil's silence grew heavier. He sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while Sara changed and tried to lighten the mood. She thought the pressure of travel might be getting to him. She suggested a spa session for them both, but he declined coldly. Sara sat outside for a while, confused and uneasy. She didn't realize that Adil's mind had already started rewriting reality. Every smile she gave to someone else, every glance, was now proof in his eyes that she didn't respect him. That night, they attended another dinner event at the resort. Sara wore a red dress that caught the candlelight beautifully. She smiled at a couple sitting nearby, who asked about their honeymoon. Adil watched, silent and cold. His jealousy had grown into something he couldn't hide anymore. When they returned to the villa, he followed behind her with an expression she couldn't read. Sara tried to talk to him, to ask what was wrong, but he brushed her off. When she turned away to put her phone on the table, he noticed a notification light up the screen, a message from a female friend congratulating her again on the wedding. But Adil's eyes saw only betrayal, his imagination turning that harmless text into something else entirely. As the night deepened, his anger no longer hid behind calmness. The sea outside was calm and endless, but inside the villa, tension thickened like smoke. What began as a perfect honeymoon was quietly transforming into a silent battlefield, one where love was no longer stronger than pride, and jealousy was becoming the only thing that could win. The third day of the honeymoon began with an unsettling quiet. Sara sensed the tension but tried to pretend everything was normal. She suggested a morning swim, hoping to ease the distance that had grown between them. Adil agreed, though his smile looked forced. They walked hand in hand to the beach, but every time someone looked their way, Adil's eyes darted to Sara, as if searching for a reason to be angry. When a group of wealthy tourists passed by, laughing and talking, Sara glanced at them briefly. That one glance ignited the fury Adil had been trying to suppress. He felt humiliated, as though everyone could see through him, as if those men were mocking him silently. Sara splashed water playfully, trying to draw his attention back, but he barely responded. His mind replayed her glance again and again until it became something entirely different, something wrong and deliberate. The woman he had loved only days ago now looked to him like someone testing his patience, someone who enjoyed seeing him hurt. He convinced himself that she had married him only for his money, that she was already searching for someone wealthier, someone better. After the swim, they returned to the villa, and Sara decided to order lunch in. She hummed softly as she unpacked their bags, unaware that Adil's eyes followed her every move. He checked her phone while she was in the shower, scrolling through her messages and photos. There was nothing suspicious, but that didn't matter. His paranoia filled in what reality lacked. Every contact name became a possible secret. Every old picture felt like evidence of betrayal. By the time Sara stepped out of the shower, Adil's heart was pounding with blind rage. He said nothing through lunch, but his silence was colder than ever. Sara tried to stay calm, thinking he might be tired or unwell. She mentioned taking a sunset walk later, but he didn't answer. The sound of waves outside was peaceful, but inside, an invisible storm was building. Adil's face had hardened. His thoughts were poisonous. He remembered the laughter of the rich men on the beach, the smile on Sara's face, and the compliments she had received from strangers. To him, all of it connected into one cruel truth. His wife was disrespecting him in public, embarrassing him in front of others. As evening approached, Sara dressed in a soft yellow outfit and stepped onto the balcony to capture another sunset photo. The golden light touched her face gently, making her look serene. Adil watched from behind her, his mind spiraling deeper into jealousy. To him, she looked too confident, too free, like she no longer belonged to him. He felt as though he was losing control, and that loss terrified him. When she turned and smiled at him, his chest tightened with anger. That simple, innocent smile looked fake to him now, as if mocking everything he felt. Without realizing it, his love had already transformed into hate. The man who once promised to protect her was now consumed by the thought that she had betrayed him, and in that belief, he began to see violence as justice. That night, the quiet of the villa felt unnatural. The gentle sound of waves could not hide the growing tension inside. Adil sat on the couch, his thoughts tangled in jealousy and rage. Sara was in the bedroom, packing a few clothes she had taken out earlier. She could feel that something was wrong. His silence had grown darker, his eyes colder. What had started as discomfort now felt like danger. She thought about calling her mother but convinced herself it was just stress. She didn't know that Adil's mind had crossed a line that could never be undone. Hours passed, and neither spoke. When Sara stepped outside to admire the moonlit sea, Adil followed her. He watched her gaze into the distance, unaware that he saw it as proof she was thinking of someone else. In his twisted imagination, every gesture meant disloyalty. The man who had once admired her grace now saw only deceit in her calmness. His love had curdled into something toxic and uncontrollable. When Sara turned back toward him, she noticed the expression on his face, empty and distant, yet frighteningly intense. She froze for a moment, sensing danger but unable to understand it fully. Adil stepped closer, his mind filled with images that weren't real, thoughts that whispered lies he believed. The jealousy that had been simmering now erupted into uncontrollable fury. In a moment of blind rage, he grabbed her arm, his anger exploding without words. Sara tried to pull away, terrified by the change in him. She stumbled, her voice breaking in fear. But Adil was beyond reason. His mind was no longer his own, it was ruled by an imagined betrayal that felt more real than truth itself. The more she cried, the angrier he became, convinced that her fear was guilt. The scene turned violent, fast, and merciless. The quiet villa became a prison of screams and confusion. The ocean outside kept its rhythm, calm and indifferent, as if the world refused to witness what was happening. When the noise finally stopped, silence returned, heavier than before. Adil stood over Sara, trembling, his rage slowly dissolving into shock. He looked down at her motionless body, realizing too late what he had done. The woman he claimed to love, the one he had promised to cherish, lay lifeless on the white marble floor. The reality hit him in waves, first disbelief, then horror, then despair. His hands shook as he tried to make sense of it, but there was nothing left to explain. The once beautiful honeymoon suite now looked like a scene of tragedy. The curtains swayed softly with the sea breeze, carrying the scent of salt and regret. Adil sat beside her, his mind empty, staring into nothing. Hours passed before he could move again. He opened the balcony door and stepped out, the sound of the sea echoing in his ears. Everything around him looked exactly as it had before, peaceful, untouched yet. His world had collapsed completely. The dream honeymoon had ended in silence, death, and irreversible ruin. When morning came, the sun poured through the curtains as if nothing had happened. The sea shimmered, the resort buzzed softly with life, and the staff prepared breakfast for the guests who were still celebrating love. Inside Villa 208, silence sat thick in the air. Adil had not slept. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, his mind shattered and hollow. The reality of what he had done pressed against him like a weight he couldn't lift. Sara lay motionless beside him, her lifeless hand draped over the sheets that once symbolized a new beginning. Adil could barely breathe. He ran his fingers through his hair, trembling as the memories of the night replayed over and over. The shouting, the struggle, the sound of her falling, it all blurred together into a nightmare that wouldn't fade. He whispered to himself that it wasn't supposed to happen, that he only wanted her to understand him, but his words were meaningless now. Every second that passed deepened his awareness that there was no undoing it. He stood slowly, moving through the room like a ghost. Her perfume still lingered in the air, mixing with the salt of the sea breeze. Her phone lay on the nightstand, the last message still visible, a cheerful text from her best friend asking for honeymoon pictures. Adil picked it up, stared at the glowing screen, and felt something inside him break completely. He understood, at last, that there had been no betrayal. His suspicions, his anger, his jealousy, they had all been illusions born of insecurity and pride. But that realization came far too late. When the cleaning staff knocked on the door, Adil didn't respond. They knocked again, thinking the couple might be asleep. The hours passed and the resort management finally sent a staff member with a spare key. When the door opened, the sight inside froze them in shock. Within minutes, police and paramedics arrived. The resort, once filled with music and laughter, fell into uneasy silence. Tourists whispered by the poolside, unaware of the full story but sensing something terrible had happened. Adil didn't resist when the authorities entered. He didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't try to defend himself. He simply stared at Sara's body as officers handcuffed him. When asked what had happened, he could only murmur that he loved her too much. The investigators pieced together the scene: no forced entry, no sign of struggle beyond the room itself. Everything pointed to a crime of passion. The perfect honeymoon had turned into a headline. Businessman arrested in wife's death during Maldives trip. News spread fast. Within hours, social media erupted with outrage, sympathy, and confusion. Photos of the smiling couple at their wedding circulated alongside grim details of the tragedy. Friends who had attended the celebration were stunned. They remembered Adil as proud but charming, and Sara as gentle and warm. No one could understand how a story that began with love could end in such horror. Back in Dubai, the case dominated every news outlet. Reporters stood outside Adil's mansion, describing his success, his wealth, and now his downfall. Some blamed the pressures of ego and control. Others pointed to the dark side of possessiveness disguised as love. Sara's family, broken and speechless, waited to bring her body home. The image of their daughter leaving for her honeymoon with dreams of happiness now haunted them as a symbol of loss that could never be explained. During the trial, Adil remained mostly silent. His lawyer spoke of mental instability and emotional imbalance, but Adil himself refused to make excuses. In his final statement, he said he had loved Sara, but had not understood what love truly meant. His eyes were empty as he admitted that he had let jealousy destroy everything beautiful in his life. The courtroom was silent as the judge announced the verdict: life imprisonment. Years later, those who still remembered the case spoke of it as a warning. It became more than just another tragedy. It became a story about how fragile love can be when poisoned by control and insecurity. The Maldives villa where it all happened was renovated and reopened, but the staff who worked there never forgot the couple from Dubai. Sometimes, new guests asked about the story they had seen online, and the older workers would simply lower their voices, saying only that it had been a honeymoon that ended too soon. Adil's name faded from the headlines, but Sara's story remained a quiet reminder of how easily beauty can turn into horror when trust is replaced by fear. In the end, what began as a dream trip meant to celebrate love became a haunting tale of obsession, a chilling warning that even the brightest places can hide the darkest endings.